Well, here we go again. I just finished. The credits just rolled on the latest Star Wars show, The Book of Boba Fett. And I gotta say, much like with The Mandalorian, this is a cheap piece of garbage knockoff that does absolutely nothing to serve the overall bigger picture of the Star Wars universe. But this one goes another step further. Not only is it completely irrelevant, much like the majority of The Mandalorian, save for the very end, the very last scene of Season 2, but the Book of Boba Fett actually serves as being inconsequential and a detriment to the entire bigger Star Wars universe. Yes, Star Wars is now worse for having this regurgitated pile of filth in its lineup than it was a day ago when it was not. And we're going to break all that down here, but if you're just here for the TLDR, the Book of Boba Fett is not a book. It is not a paperback. It is not a hardcover book. It is a single page of a coloring book meant to appeal to the lowest common denominator of all Star Wars fans, which honestly casts a very wide net. They're all idiots at this point. I mean, if you were a fan of the sequel trilogy, come on, let's get real here. The sequel trilogy was the greatest Star Wars has ever been. It was better than the original trilogy. It was better than the prequel trilogy. Seriously, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, peak Star Wars. But then they try to milk it with these scummy refuse piles of spin-off TV shows. Yeah, spin-off TV shows. Widen the universe. Get the fans, the hardcore ones, some extra lore. Follow interesting stories they couldn't tell in the movies for various reasons. Well, we've seen this fail 3 different times now. 3 different times. Mandalorian Season 1 was underwhelming. Mandalorian Season 2 was a complete cluster, except for the last scene in the last episode. And the Book of Boba Fett is so ridiculously over the top. I mean, let's run this down, right? What was the worst part of The Mandalorian Season 2? Bringing back Boba Fett. Now, we know for a fact, I know with absolute 100% unrivaled certainty that there is no way that Boba survived the Sarlacc pit at Return of the Jedi. There is no way in God's green earth that after getting sucked down that giant worm's fucking throat that he survived. But let's entertain this, Councilman. Let's entertain this. You want to bring Boba Fett back. Look, I get it. Popular character. He's got a flamethrower. He's got a ship. He's a bounty hunter. No allegiance to this, that, and the other thing. He's all about the money. Basically, he's everything you clowns want to be. Okay, I can roll with that. Let's let that scenario play out. What they call Star Wars Legends now, what used to be called the EU, where they made books and comics or whatever, they handled the character of Boba Fett with so much more detail, so many more intricacies that fleshed out his character. For a show called The Book of Boba Fett, it does an awful lot of flashing around action sequences and special effects and CGI, basically everything that The Mandalorian said that they stood against, which lasted all of 1 episode. Am I the only one that was bored to tears by the debut of The Mandalorian? I mean, it took that show 3 or 4 episodes to even get me to stay awake, to even get me to realize that there was a plot unfolding. All right? Baby Yoda is overrated, and I refuse to call that little green menace Grogu. What the fuck kind of name is Grogu? Who names their kid Grogu? Grogu? You're asking for that kid to get shoved in lockers throughout high school all of his life. The Book of Boba Fett is somehow even worse, though, by introducing a myriad of one-note sidekick characters who serve their purpose and are then written off. This is more of a monster of the week type flavor that does very little to string along any sort of coherent plot. Now, you might be saying, Dead Metal, if the Book of Boba Fett is a monster of the week type show, what's wrong with that? There are plenty of good monster of the week type shows. And to that I say, yes, you are correct. Back in 1965 to 1970. This is 2021. Oh, and because it's 2021, of course we can't have nice things. Of course Kathleen Kennedy and the Disney elite continue to slap a middle finger in the air and point it towards the OG fans such as myself. We can't have Boba Fett's ship retain the name Slave. What was it, Slave 1 or Slave I, something like that? Well, that's just too offensive for today's crowd. They need a safe space, and they've decided that Star Wars will be their safe space. So, okay. we can't even have a ship named Slave. Despite the fact, right, that in Return of the Jedi, there is a scene in which Leia is stripped down to her undergarments and literally made to be Jabba's slave. But we can't have a ship named Slave. That's too offensive. I will not be surprised if Kathleen Kennedy and the Disney elite, the SJW movement, retcon that entire scene. They go back and retroactively remove Slave Leia from Return of the Jedi. And don't get me started on how far else they're going to go. The Disney edits when Kathleen Kennedy is done with Star Wars will make Lucas's edits look like god-tier remastering work. And they have already started by saying, hey, Boba Fett's ship has a different name. We are not going to refer to it as its original name. This is honestly worse than the idea of Greedo shooting first. This is the worst thing that they could have done, and they're expecting you to accept this hand over fist. So what is the Book of Boba Fett? It's a chronicling of a character that never should have been brought back, who was brought back as pure fan service. This is basically fan service to show. If Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home are movie equivalents of fan service, this is the TV show of fan service. What do I mean by that? What do all three of these things have in common? They should not exist because their entire foundation is built and predicated on the fact that they're going to be feeding fans spoonfuls of things that they want to see. There's a reason that hardcore fans never become the writers and directors of shows and movies. It's because they have no idea what makes a good plot, what makes a coherent story, what drives characters, how to craft creative motivations and write characters into scenarios that they have to creatively get their way out of. Fan service is Captain America wielding Mjolnir. Fan service is Tobey Maguire returning to the role of Spider-Man. Fan service is Boba Fett surviving the Sarlacc pit, appearing in The Mandalorian as the worst character and then getting his own spin-off. That is fan service, and that is why the Book of Boba Fett is so disgustingly offensive to me and all the other real ones. That is why the Book of Boba Fett will never, ever soar to the heights of the greatest Star Wars show to ever grace God's green earth, Star Wars Clone Wars. Clone Wars is without a doubt the greatest show ever. And I'm not talking about like the later seasons. The last couple seasons of Clone Wars were absolute trash. I'm talking season 1 of Clone Wars was peak Star Wars TV. Yet here we are chasing the fucking high of, oh, we gotta milk Star. Like, it's like they learned nothing with the Star Wars films. Quality over quantity. All right? You got to remember, it takes time to craft art. The Book of Boba Fett is not art. It is a ripped out page of a coloring book that they gave to a 5-year-old and let him scribble on it. The book here lacks substance. The titular book lacks so much substance, it makes me sick. Not only have they ruined part of my childhood by telling me that the name I grew up learning of the ship of Boba Fett is in fact not its name and then shoving the new one down my throat, but this new series is so infested with social justice warrior wokeness, such Karen pandering content to make all the little millennials and Gen Z kids feel like Star Wars belongs to them. It makes me sick. And I'm not going to partake in it. They've ruined Boba Fett as a character. He's not even fat. Like, it's in the name. Come on. They ruined Tatooine. Trust me, I'm not going to spoil what happens, but they have ruined the planet of Tatooine. Actually, I am going to spoil it. You know how Tatooine has 2 suns? That's not enough. All right? We can't call them suns anymore because that's too specific of a gender. Tatooine now has 2 hanging circles in the sky. We can't use the term suns anymore because that offends the SJWs, the blue-haired little millennial and Gen Z children. They want a gender-neutral term, so now it is 2 hanging circles in the sky. Yes, you heard me correct. The Book of Boba Fett is a complete, concrete failure from start to finish, and if you enjoy this trash, I'm sorry. You are joining the woke movement, and you represent everything that is wrong with this world.